Audio Jungle.
We are officially halfway through the high school football season, and we've had a lot of the same topics that you would see from any high school football season. A lot of big upsets, a lot of big talking points, a lot of favorites kind of showing themselves, but you also had a lot of things that have been, as the I guess is probably the word of the year, unprecedented, is because this is an unprecedented year. A lot of cancellations, a lot of games being moved, and we are seeing both sets of topics being very prevalent this week, and we will discuss both of those in this week's episode of SpOKen Freely. I'm your host, Glenn Brockenbush, and joining me this week, I'm extremely happy to have him on, and I've been extremely excited to just geek out with him about sports, which we've done for like the past hour, is Collin Wieder from the Clinton Daily News. Collin, thank you so much for doing this, man.
Hey, I appreciate you having me on, Glenn, and I'm always happy to join another Texan in the Okie State. And I know people give us a hard time, but it's still the home.
Now, I don't know if you're like me, and we'll talk about this more later. I've got something a little goofy cooked up for our final segment, but
oh boy,
I don't know if you're like me, but in terms of identification. Because I have an Oklahoma driver's license, which when I got that, I held on to my Texas driver's license for way too long. Probably should have gotten pulled over. But I
did. So if you wanted to know, I did get pulled over for that. So it did happen to me. So
I wasn't going to put you on the spot, but say, when you identify, like when people ask you where you're from, like does it depend on who's asking you? Because like I still identify as almost as like a Texlahoman. Like I definitely am a Texan, but like I definitely take pride. I mean, I've lived in Oklahoma, I went to college for 4 years. I've been in Lawton for almost 4. And so it's like I spent, probably, more than a quarter of my life in Oklahoma. So it's like, I don't know. Do you kind of have a weird identity crisis from time to time?
It's weird. I kind of like to say, I mean, I went to school and I grew up in Texas, born and raised, and then went to school at Abilene Christian. So I was in Texas for 22 years. I've been in Clinton for 4 years and 3 months. So Texas is still always home. Still love going there. But I do love being a Clintonite, and I love covering the Red Tornadoes. It's been a fun journey. So it's kind of weird. I kind of more like to say I'm a Texan born and raised, but I'm a Clintonite by travel. So I like them both. I don't want to ever say I'm an Okie. I think that would probably make me sick. And I say that as someone who married a Sooner who went to OU. So I'm really probably making her real happy right now. But she knows how I feel. So it's okay.
The first time I will say that there are, we're all people, there really isn't much difference between us all. I do find, meeting people from different cultures and different parts of the United States very interesting. And I will say when we traveled, when my wife and I got to go to a wedding up in Rhode Island, we did kind of get poked fun at for our twangs, which we apparently have.
I guess
I don't notice, but
I don't either.
And, I do think the first time I accidentally dropped the word pop instead of soda in front of my dad, he was like, I have no son. And, but no, it's, you bring up, being in Clinton, you've been there for over 4 years and, doing great work there at the paper. And man, you guys have, obviously a great tradition there in football. And you and I met actually at a football game last year when when Clinton played MacArthur. And part of the reason I wanted to have you on this week is because you and I will hopefully be in the press box together in less than 1 week's time, as Clinton and Cash will meet for a big Class 4A District 1 matchup. And I say big, we are, full disclosure, recording this on Saturday morning. I'm hoping to have this edited by later, so this isn't completely dated. But Cash still has a game to play today against Newcastle. So we don't know how that's going to go. Cash is probably favored in that one, and they're number 5 in the state right now. But Clinton, you and I talked earlier. This is a team that was kind of up and down last year, and this is a district that you and I both had everybody really had big expectations for, really probably the top district in Class 4A. Yes, you lose Anadarko, but then you get Bethany, who's, was number one in Class 4A for much of last year. And Clinton, has been, unfortunately, the past 2 weeks has had to come up with
switch things up.
Yeah. And last night they had to come up with one on the fly against a very formidable 3A opponent against Kingfisher. And man, sadly, you saw a heck of a game. Talk a little bit about that one. Clinton with a big upset, I think, over the Kingfisher Yellow Jackets.
I think this was kind of the game I went in, really believing, they've kind of progressed as the weeks have gone on. They kind of had a rough start against Woodward. They won, but it was a 26-21 win where they really didn't ever find a good rhythm, and they didn't really look like the Clinton of old that people have come to expect. Then they play Heritage Hall, very, very close, and everyone kind of perks up and goes, "Hey, now that's a little different." 14-7, kept it very close, and then the Elgin game. I know they're kind of ranked towards the bottom of the district, but absolutely came out and dominated, scored on every drive but one in the first half, rolled, and then really came out with a big win. So it was like this weird, you'd seen them kind of progress, but you just hadn't known because they've been 8-6 over their last 14. And then Kingfisher, who's number 6 in 3A, a team that's got a lot of different playmakers, can run the ball extremely well with Cade Stevenson, and has a good young quarterback and Jack Sternberger. They absolutely looked like a very good team coming in, and they are. And Clinton last night, defensively, bend but don't break all night. Gave up 250 yards in the first half, but only gave up 3 points. Forced turnovers, found a way to cut drives short, and just found a way to really limit things. And then offensively, they were able to string together 2 really long scoring drives with Tyson Miller as the lead back and Caden Powell hitting some key quick throws to keep the defense off balance. And the biggest thing was, Trell Bryson, he had a monster first half, forcing 2 turnovers, and then scoring the team's lone first touchdown in the first half. But then when he went down with an injury, Tyson Miller stepped in, and I think he carried 16 times for 141 and a touchdown. And that was kind of always been the thing with Clinton over the last year and a half is, can they win without a Trell Bryson on the field? I think people have jokingly called them the fighting of Trells. I've heard that the coaches have even kind of motivated the team with that, and they more than answered that call by saying, "Hey, you know what? We're just as good. We can find a way to make things work." I say they're not just as good, but they definitely take a step back. But we can find a way to win without him. And last night was really that step where I was like, okay, we have something different here. Caden Powell is throwing the ball extremely well through 4 games, 6 touchdowns, no picks, hasn't even really put the ball in harm's way. And when you can do that with the running game that they've had with Tyson Miller at running back, with Tavius Jennings even getting a few carries, Trey Bennett at fullback, Brandon Pleasant, and then Caden adding some power at quarterback when he takes design runs. When you've got that paired together, you become a very tough offense to stop. And then defensively, I think they had going into last night, it was 13 forced turnovers in 3 games. And I think they had 3 or 4 more. So they're at 16 or 17 forced turnovers in 4 games. So when your turnover margin is plus 14, you're going to be winning a lot of football games. And that's what's impressed me the most. That and then the physicality. They're outmatched on the offensive and defensive line every night. Kingfisher maybe not so much last night, but they're outmatched every week. But physicality-wise, they can compete with anybody, and they kind of proved that last night. I think Cade Stevenson, he even had a carry 5'9", 140-pound corner, which was Tyson Miller, who also plays running back, upends him. And I'm like, that kid's 6'2", 210. I mean, that just shows you, they're not afraid to go tackle people. And the game was honestly, it was 21-3 with 30 seconds to go in the fourth. I mean, the second half absolutely dominated. And Kingfisher had no answer for them. And you kind of tell they'd broken their will there late in the fourth that they didn't want any more part of it. So to me, they looked like the 2018 version of Clinton. And it really kind of becoming that team where you're like, if they keep progressing, it could be something special. So this Friday's matchup could be a phenomenal one. I really do think, we've talked about for a long time that Weatherford, Cache, and Clinton have kind of always been those three alternating teams at the top for the last 3 years. And last year, I know they kind of fell off a little bit, but I'd say they're back. And they've been bringing the tradition back under head coach John Higbee, who's in his third year. They were trying to get the old things established again, and they're, you can tell those are starting, the residual effects, the year after year, it's starting to roll over. And now I'd probably say they're become one of those teams that's a contender in 4A again.
Yeah, and just hearing some of what you were talking about, I'm having flashbacks to last year's game because Artrell Bryson, he's a phenomenal athlete, and and Caden Powell, it's one of those things where I feel like if it wasn't for the fact that he might be the best baseball player in the state, a lot of people would pay more attention to him at quarterback. But also when you're in a run-heavy offense, you don't necessarily have to. You're not always asked to do a whole lot, and that's kind of the second thing that popped into my head listening to you talk about that is so many of the topics that you touched on about Clinton really resonate with Cash right now too. Is it's a very run-heavy offense. You have a bell cow in Kynell Daniels, who I joked with Kevin Green last week that if they had like a 4A Heisman or something right now, like I know I'm obviously biased, but Kynell Daniels has been everything you want and more for the Cash Bulldogs. But Hunter Glenn, a lot like Caden Powell, when you need him to make a big play, he'll do it. And they run kind of a weird offense that it honestly kind of mirrors what MacArthur does a little bit, just not out of the shotgun as much. And it kind of makes a little bit of sense because Farron Griffin coached under Ernie Manning at MacArthur for years, and kind of took some of the same things that Brett is doing at MacArthur offensively. It's just more run based and more out of kind of a tricky one back or two back offense. And they run a lot of motion, run a lot of end arounds, run a lot of fakes. It's very complicated if you're not used to playing against it. And you mentioned the physicality and how Clinton is kind of undersized at times against some of these other teams. That's going to be a really interesting matchup because that Cash front, especially with a guy like Jeffrey Pattyacre, who I think weighs in at over 320 pounds, that's a big line. And that's going to be really interesting to see. Clinton is a team that you and I talked about has this year, I think that win last night absolutely caught my eye as, I'm not saying this to blow smoke up yours or anybody else from Clinton, but, as somebody who does, vote weekly in the polls, you have to go based on what and I don't get to watch, you don't get to watch a lot of these teams. So you don't know, how these games play out. You just have a box score or just a score on Scoredle to go based off of and be like, well, this team won by this many points. I guess they're good, and to hear.
I was kind of throwing those numbers out. I guess I was maybe trying to sell you. I'm like turnover margin.
Good job.
Caden
You
Powell's
did a great
TD
job.
to INT ratio.
Well,
I'm just I'm pouring in all the numbers for you.
You're a great salesman, Wieder.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to do.
I might buy a car from you later. Kingfisher is a team that I watched in the playoffs last year against Marlowe, and obviously they lost, guys like the Abercrombie brothers and a lot of other players. But you bring back Cade Stevens. That is a good team and a good program.
Yeah, very good team.
When you told me that they only had 3 points with like 30 seconds or a minute remaining, that's stunning to me. I mean, that's a team that Marlowe couldn't keep off the dang scoreboard last year. And I say that. I think it was 28-28 heading into overtime. But, it was still a tough offense to stop. And
absolutely,
I haven't seen the youngest Sternberger play, but if he's anything like his brothers, that's a golly, that's a lot of It's a lot of kids.
It's a lot of talent in
I
that.
don't know what
name.
I don't know what they're putting.
I don't know what they put in the
Sternberger.
Sternberger household, but they find a way to NFL. The other one's a starter for a college basketball team as a freshman, and now you got the sophomore who's starting at quarterback.
I was
already
joked last week.
It's unbelievable
with Kevin Green about the Presleys at Bixby with Brennan at OSU now, and Braylon might be just as fast. And I think they've got a sister who's like a track star, I think at Ole Miss or something like that. I need to
some of these families, man. Yeah,
I need to give me some of them cornflakes they're eating. I don't know what's going on, but
what's going on?
You talked earlier about, or I mentioned earlier about how for the second consecutive week, Clinton had to kind of come up with an opponent on the fly. From your conversations with Coach Higbee, what was kind of the process this week? When did this kind of get thrown together? Their game against Kingfisher.
Well, the game against Kingfisher, I actually got a text from Coach Higbee Sunday morning saying they were going to play at Kingfisher. And I know what kind of has been the criteria that they've been wanting to go with was we want to have a district game first and foremost. That's the thing they try to do every time because you're wanting to try to get as many of your district games in so you have, you better your chances of making the playoffs, you better your chances of bettering your record inside the league. Then it goes home game. And, then from there on, then you have to make a decision on if you're going to play a non-district game. So this one didn't really meet. I mean, on all honesty, it wasn't a perfect fit in terms of what they were looking for. But Kingfisher, the superintendent there was the old superintendent at Clinton. So he had some ties here. So it was kind of a connection of, hey, these two schools used to play each other. It was renewing of a rivalry that hadn't played since 2007. But they kind of came together, and the kids, ironically, they live like an hour and a half from each other, but these kids kind of know each other. So it's one of those things where you're like, it's weird, but it's a rivalry that, it isn't played a whole lot on the football field, but it came together. I commend, Clinton Public Schools for it. They found a way nearly every time, other than the Millwood game being canceled at the 11th hour a couple weeks ago, which there's nothing they could do anything about that. But I commend them for finding a way to get that game. And then even the previous week, I mean, they were supposed to go to Newcastle, then they're at Elgin, right. But finding a way to get those to come together, those are huge. And they're looking every time for an opponent. They're thinking 1, 2, 3 steps ahead, which is smart. I mean, even I think it was about a week ago, I got a text asking, if I knew of any schools that would be available for, I think it's week 7 when they're supposed to play at Elgin, because that game's, since they've already played Elgin, now they've got to find an opponent there. So they're trying to either find a district game for there, or they're already looking like, hey, how can we get another non-district? How can we, because they understand that this is a weird time, but the best way to handle it is to be 1, 2, 3 steps ahead.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And it's such a weird situation that everybody's in. And, I actually talked to Farron Griffin at Cash last week, I guess the day after their game against Bethany, and he let me know ahead of time that, like you said, the Clinton was supposed to play Newcastle, and then Newcastle obviously had COVID cases, and I guess their players and Frederick in our area was actually in a similar boat, as players were basically being released from quarantine on Friday night. I guess it would have been last night, the 2nd. And so, if you needed to move the game, can we play it on a Saturday? And that's what Coach Griffin said was, he was willing to work with the how dare you? No decorum.
I know.
I'm leaving this in too. No, it's whatever. But he brought up, he was like, at the end of the day, we want to play ball, and we want to play district games if possible. And he goes, I feel for the kids at Newcastle. He goes, I'm not going to be a jerk about it. He goes, if they need to play on Saturday, I'll play them. I'll play them on Saturday. And I think that's the thing that I hope a lot of people realize. I hope they realize is, and I'm sure you've seen this on Twitter, and this was one of my favorite things during the summer, and I use favorite in air quotes, is people crafting these things about like as if we, the media, or that the people in charge didn't want football to happen or didn't want games to happen. That was ridiculous.
It was absolutely
huge moneymaker. It is a huge deal to these kids and a huge deal to these communities. And so when I hear things about, I guess I shouldn't be surprised that these teams will play anybody basically at any time.
And they'll work overtime to find a way to make it work. Which,
at the end of the day, these coaches, A, they get paid to do this, but B, they enjoy doing this. And,
and these kids, it's their senior year. I mean, I think that's kind of what's lost. And it was nice to see. I think it was a Stillwater player about a week ago, same thing, or a couple weeks ago, whenever they had one of their games canceled.
Yeah.
He posted, he goes, I don't think, especially people who don't play sports, they don't understand what it's not like to have your senior year, whether it be just because you're playing for high school, you don't get that back. No. You don't get this time back. And then if you're playing in college, you're not getting film. You're not getting recruited. And not being with your friends, he even wrote about, some of us have gone through depression through this whole thing. I mean, there's a lot that plays into what's been going on. And I don't think anybody in their right mind wanted college, high school, NFL, football, didn't want it to happen. We all were like, we want this to happen. Yeah. We understand the stuff that's going on, but I think everybody was like, if we can find a solution, absolutely, we want to make this happen. And that's kind of what the approach has been. I know for Clinton and Cache, because they're two of the top ranked teams always in 4A1 and in 4A over the last few years, they've been wanting, they're going to search out opponents because they want to compete. And when you want to compete, you're not afraid to go play a Kingfisher on the road. You're not afraid to make a Saturday game work. You're going to find ways to make that happen. I think that's why this matchup is going to be so interesting, is because I know both these teams, they are not afraid to play each other.
No.
And they're kind of similar in a lot of the same things that they do, because Clinton and Cache, they're not going to, you're not going to get okey-doked by a lot of them. You're not going to get you're not going to get all these trick play. What they're going to do is they're going to say, I'm going to take this football, I'm going to hand it to my best player, I'm going to out-execute you for 4 quarters and see if you can stop me.
Exactly.
And that's why I love it, is because it is this old school physical beating of a matchup. Because when you watch it, you're like, it's just violent. And I'm not going to lie, I love watching it, because in the age of the spread and everybody's throwing – you see quarterbacks throwing 40 times in a high school game. And I'm like, Caden throws it 12 times a game.
Right.
He clearly could. He's got the arm for it. He's a phenomenal quarterback. But I'm like, they're running the sweep. They're running the belly handoff to the fullback. And then you've got, almost in the same sense, in a similar way, Cache, who's bought in totally to head coach Farron Griffin, where they're running the motion sweep and they're running the dive to the fullback. And it's, there's not going to be a whole lot of, zigzagging. It's the same thing. I'm going to come at you every single down. I think that's why people love this matchup, is because it is two schools who love physical football and they embrace it, and they love to show that off.
Yeah, no, you hit the nail on the head. It's definitely one of those things where I remember last year's game between Clinton and MacArthur. I probably could count on my hands, on my fingers, just how many times Caden Powell put the ball in the air. Clearly he could throw. I mean, clearly he's got a good arm. It's just that just wasn't in the game plan. And when you can run the ball as effectively as they did with as many weapons, I kept having to ask you who was carrying the ball, because I assumed it was Bryson, but then they had 4 or 5 other guys that they could plug in. And it's going to be very interesting where, you mentioned the whole deal about how teams not afraid to play. Clinton Cache not afraid to play the big boys. I mean, 2 of Cache's first 3 games this year were against El Reno on the road, and then Plainview, who played for a state title last year.
Yeah.
I'm going to need to get my dogs. Hold on one sec.
All right.
It's stinking.
Ain't no doubt about that.
All right. Yeah, the strength of schedule for both teams has been great so far. If you're able to – and we saw it last night where, even though the game the kind of clash of the Titans, if you will, didn't end up living up to the billing, but the Bixby and Carl Albert game able to be thrown together last minute. Coaches are willing to make these moves because, if it's a non-district, you don't want to say it doesn't matter, but for playoff purposes, it really doesn't. And, what is that going to hurt if you play a team that's better than you? You're going to get better. And I think, programs like Clinton, programs like Cache, you're definitely, obviously Clinton, having won, state titles and having been such a power at kind of the median school level for so long that, they probably have more pedigree than Cache does. Cache last year won its first playoff game since the, early 80s. So it's – but Cache is slowly, I think, building a program and building an identity. And like you said with Coach Higbee there, you're building a culture, and then, a couple of years in, you're able to get kids to buy in, and you're really seeing that code, that kind of culture really take hold in Cache. I mean,
exactly.
The people in Cache, and I hope, I don't know what the protocol is, COVID wise, but I hope you get to see it, this week at Ulrich Stadium. That's a rabid fan base right now. It's a fan base that is just excited to have good football. And,
they've had it for a while. I mean,
I've got a couple of coworkers that have kids that go to Cache schools, and they're always telling, are you writing about Cache? Are you writing about, I'm like, we're writing about,
we're writing about them. They keep winning.
You keep winning. We'll write about them. And that's what's so fun is, our mutual friend, my old coworker, Seth Olson, I used to tease him about getting too sucked in or too emotionally invested in some of these teams that you cover, but it's hard not to when A, and B, they do it the right way. And,
absolutely.
And, Seth was, we joked that he was basically on the Cache beat a couple of years ago, because we would send him to like our area game of the week, and for like 3 to 4 weeks it was Cache.
It was just Cache.
Because it was always important, because it was, they can make the playoffs for the first time this year. They can win a playoff game there were so many storylines, and now we're covering them not just because of storylines, because, this is the first time that they do. It's not a novelty anymore. It's because they're that good, and it's it's really refreshing to see. And you mentioned earlier, Class 4A in that district especially. I mean, it's so unpredictable right now, and especially with teams like Elk City and Chickasha not always getting to play games. Elk City came back last night, played Bethany fairly close, really. Lost 42-28. That's an Elk City program that's, I think, slowly on the rise. Again, Elgin, no match for Weatherford, and that was kind of expected. But, Newcastle's a program that I know a lot of people, I haven't gotten to see up close, but I know a lot of people have said, including yourself, said, a lot of people picked them to possibly make the playoffs this year. That's
and looking at the district, I think, like you were saying, we talked about that this district is so deep. I mean, outside of really Elgin, who no offense to Elgin, I know they're having a rebuilding year, but they're 8th in the district. And then for me, honestly, it gets pretty muddled from about 7 to, I'd probably say 7 to like 3 or 4 in the district. I mean, you have a team in Chickasha who, they graduated a lot of seniors, but had a winning season, returned to the playoffs last year. They bring back a good quarterback in Cache Lowry. Elk City, who just hired Clinton's old head coach from the 80s, who actually also coached at DeSoto in Texas and Garden City in Kansas by the name of Dave Meadows. He is turning them around really quick. I mean, he's making adjustments on the fly. He's got a great running back to work with in Day Thompson. Got great weapons surrounding that program. And they always – I even saw it last year. Even when they were 0-10, I was like, there are pieces here. It's just going to take the right guy to put these pieces into motion. And they've got the right guy. Coach Meadows has them turn around pretty quick. They're 2-2. They pushed Bethany. At one point, I think they were actually in the lead yesterday against Bethany pretty late in the game. So they're there. And then Bethany, graduated Sam Brandt, lost a lot of pieces, same thing. But they've been so good for so long, you knew they were going to maintain some of that. And, they're still a solid program. You're going to get a solid game with them. You're going to get, a solid game with Newcastle, who's in, I think, the 4th year of Coach Jeff Brickman. And they've been running the spread there for a while, where they're kind of getting in the hang of things. They've got a pretty good offense there. That defensively, they were coming along a little more last year as well. So, you've got multiple teams right there in that middle section of the district that are just, you're not going to get an easy win in this district outside of Elgin. You have to show up, and if you let somebody hang around for a few quarters, you're going to be stuck in a pretty tough game. I mean, you're going to have to compete on a night-to-night basis. And then you've got, at the top, at least until, and I'm sure Clinton fans are going to get upset at me for this, but because they went to the state championship last year, and Clinton did beat them, but because they went to the state championship last year and they returned so many of those guys, Weatherford's still at the top for now. And then I think it's Weatherford, Clinton, and Cache are right there at the top competing for that 1, 2, 3. And so it's a district that you're going to have to bring A game or pretty close to A game every night so you can, win games, make it to the playoffs. I mean, it's just going to be a grudge match. And then we'll kind of, I guess, get to see how good that district is when postseason comes around, because they'll get those matchups, and we'll see if, hey, did 1, 2, and 3, did they advance, and did the fourth give the 1 a good game, or even find a way. So it's just one of those things where I think it's going to help both teams out tremendously, and we're going to see that as the season progresses.
I was never a huge pro wrestling fan, but I am picturing it in my head that it is like a last man standing, and I can just picture I'm just picturing all these teams represented by wrestlers trying to get that briefcase. And it's like, absolutely, Weatherford has been the top dog, in recent years. And obviously when you have a player like Ethan Downs, he's, exceptional, but they have more than just him. They have really looked really good so far. Yeah, it's going to be really interesting.
Oh yeah. And,
I
will say my one pound the table thing that I will give to Clinton is, and people will probably go, well, he's not even ranked, but they're going to find out soon enough, as most people have. When Atrell Bryson is on the football field, he is the best player on the football field when healthy, and that includes even when they play Weatherford and Ethan Downs. So wow. I'll say that I don't have a problem with that. I think he's the best kept secret in the state of Oklahoma. He does have D1 interest, and I know. It's not out there yet, but when he is healthy, he's a phenomenal player. He had like a 3-game stretch last year, I think, where he only carried like 20 something times for 400 and something yards and 7 touchdowns. He is, and that's a running back. At free safety, he reads quarterbacks better than anybody else I've watched in my 4 years of cover, 4+ years of covering Clinton. And I truly do believe if the right situation comes along, he's going to get that interest. That's just my opinion. And I guess I'll probably take a little bit of some homer heat for that, but I've watched him for his entire career, and I'm like, you can't tell me there's a better player. And of course and of course last year he kind of did get to prove that in a way, beating Weatherford the way they did. And I think many people will see that eventually, and so that's just my opinion.
And I'm excited to get to see him again. It should be a heck of a matchup this upcoming weekend, and just a flurry of great it does feel almost like in Texas they used to call the district with Odessa Permian and all that, they call it the Little Southwest Conference. This district almost feels like a little SEC West. Just no easy games, man.
No easy games.
All right, well, before I let you go, I like to do something fun, kind of unique to my guest. And we are in a very unique situation because you and I hail from pretty much kind of the same area, both from the Dallas-Fort Worth area, both transplants to Oklahoma. So I'm going to give you a little kind of this or that quiz, allow you to kind of put you on the – because, at the beginning we talked about, do you identify as a Texan? Do you identify as an Okie? And so we're going to test where your answers truly lie.
Oh gosh!
So we will give you a couple questions.
Yeah.
So first of all, if you had to pick Joe T. Garcia's or Ted's.
Oh, Joe T. Garcia's. It's not even a question. Not even a question. I'm probably not going to lean very well to the Okie side. I'm already seeing this from the early get going. I love Oklahoma, but this is already turning out to be a Texas-filled answer list at the start.
I will say, but I think I know where this next one is going. Fort Worth Stockyards or Bricktown?
Oh, man. Well, that's you know what? I would probably say Fort Worth Stockyards just because, I have been down there more. But to be honest, over the years, being up here, I do love Bricktown. I'm going to end up picking the Stockyards. But I'm going to give props. Bricktown has made it closer for me just because – I do what they've done down there is phenomenal. It's awesome. Like a mini. Yeah. It's a mini. If you've ever been to the San Antonio Riverwalk, which I'm just giving another Texas reference in there, but it's very much like a small San Antonio Riverwalk, and I love it. I mean, like every time we go, I'm like, it's getting up there on my list. If you ask me maybe in a couple more years, I might jump it. I mean, I should have asked
you to craft this because that's a far better apples to apples comparison. I guess.
No, you're fine. You're fine. And I would have definitely picked the Riverwalk, so that wouldn't have helped me either.
That's true. Well, because I was asking somebody the other night about this, and I said, do you compare the Fort Worth Stockyards to the OKC Stockyards? They're like, no, because Fort Worth Stockyards is like restaurants and shops.
Oh, it's awesome.
The Oklahoma City
awesome.
stockyards is just cows.
Yeah,
And,
it literally is like
it's the legit
what you think
stockyards.
of when you hear the
Right.
word stockyards.
And
instead
so I
of
figure, you know,
this whole other thing.
I could have gone with like a Sundance Square or something like that to compare to Bricktown, but I figured the stockyards, that's kind of an iconic Fort Worth thing. I couldn't come up with I struggled coming up with a great comparison here. Now, have you been to? So I guess I have to preface this. Have you been to? Is it Sid's or Tucker's Onion Burgers?
Oh man,
have you been to either of those?
I've been to Tucker's, so
Okay.
I guess I would pick
Okay.
Tucker's. I've never been to Sid's, so that's a tough answer.
Okay, so then I guess the question is Tucker's or Kincaid's? Have you been? You've been to Kincaid's in Fort Worth?
I've been to Kincaid's, yeah. I've been to Tucker's. I'm gonna go with Kincaid's.
Okay,
I'm gonna go with Kincaid's.
That's what I would have picked as well.
Yeah, I'm going with Kincaid's.
I grew up. My dad grew up on the east side of Fort Worth, and I mean, my dad was kind of your quintessential Texan. Just I like my beer from Shiner, and I like I like my burgers from Kincaid's, and like he took me to Kincaid's when I was like 14. And if you get to go to the original store, it's great because it was a legit old grocery store, and like you get to stand in line as if you're buying groceries. And some of the stores you can still buy like canned corn or whatever while you get your burgers. But I've not been to Tucker's, so I guess maybe it's unfair for me to judge. But
and if before you even get to that one question that I expect is coming, if you're asking Whataburger versus Brahms, you're talking to the biggest Whataburger enthusiast that has ever lived.
Brahms is in Texas too, and I grew up.
It is. But Brahms is based, of course, in Tuttle, and Whataburger is a Texas. Is a Texas staple, and I am 100% Whataburger all the way. It ain't even close. I even when I came down
trouble because I don't know who I would pick.
Yeah, I came down to the Elgin game last week, and of course Elgin's about 20 minutes from the closest Whataburger. But I told my photographer we always pick where to go the week before, and we always pick a good restaurant usually that's local. But if it's within a close proximity to a Whataburger, I at least go to Whataburger. Yeah. You think we can go to Whataburger? And number 2 meat and cheese only every time, man. I know I'm bland, but that's what I'm talking about.
See,
and that fancy ketchup.
I typically go with one of the all-time classics. If they like the I need to start a petition. If they could bring back the A1 Thick and Hearty or the
you would go with it,
or the Chop House Cheddar, then they will be a customer for life.
I wish they would have.
I will eat there every day, and I will gain
100 pounds. Oh, do the same thing with the Buffalo Ranch chicken strip sandwich. If they had that on the regular,
Now, final question. This one, or final 2 questions. This one I feel like is probably unfair. You go with. You look at the questions, man. What do you think about it? I didn't even write this one down because I thought it was too much of a gimme, and I feel like it probably is. Do you go with Frontier City or do you go with Six Flags?
Oh yeah, Six Flags. Okay. First of all, I've never been to Frontier City.
I will say
that. I will preface that, but I can at least say from the size of parks and the selection of roller coasters, it ain't even close. Yeah. It is Six Flags, 10 out of 10 every time. Yeah, I could put. I mean, I don't know how many different parks in Texas, SeaWorld, Fiesta, Texas. I'd put all of them above Frontier City, and that's nothing against Frontier City. It's just the selection. It's selection. And I think even people that aren't from Oklahoma, or even people from Oklahoma would be like, look,
would admit that.
We go down to and I always laugh because there's this thing that goes both ways between Oklahoma and Texas. They always bag on each other and, you guys are this, you guys are that. And I'm like, you guys are pretty similar. I was like, to be honest, I was like, living in both states, it's very similar.
Yeah,
I love them both.
As somebody who covered the Texas OU game last year, as a neutral, as somebody who grew up not liking the Longhorns, as somebody who went to college not liking the Sooners, I'm like, I don't like either of them either. So I'm with you. At all.
Yeah.
So, but you hear the fans badmouth each other. I'm like, you guys are very similar. You really are. And
you really are.
And that actually coalesces to my. Or converges on my final I was stealing your word from earlier. Converges on my final question. And this one I feel like it's a closer one for me because I've experienced one a lot more than the other. But I mentioned the OU Texas game, which happens next weekend. Now, they will be not having this year, but if you're going to one state fair, are you going to Texas or are you going to Oklahoma?
Now, I'm probably about to be like, this is probably like sacrilegious on like multiple levels because I have not been to the Texas State Fair probably since I was like 5.
Okay.
And that sounds terrible.
I think we're on similar grounds there.
I honestly really never went to them. Did I always think it was super cool? Yeah. And then I went to the Oklahoma State Fair in 2017. And I'm like, I like the State Fair. It's a cool thing to go to. It's definitely great for people watching because you see some characters. That's kind of more what everybody I think really truly goes for.
We can talk about this off the podcast because I think I tweeted something recently, because first of all, I agree with you in that I have been to the Oklahoma State Fair probably about 4 times. I went to Texas once when I was about 8, and then last year for the OU Texas game. Those are the only 2 times that I can remember. And
I don't go
last
very often.
Last year I didn't get to really experience the fair itself because I was at the game. Poor me. Didn't get to have a Fletcher's corn dog. Poor me. But it was
well, it's kind of a madhouse atmosphere.
Oh, exactly. Well, afterwards, I was like, I want to get me a corn dog. And then I'm realizing, A, I needed to get tickets or tokens or whatever. And then B, I'm looking at the lines. I'm like, I'm good.
Yeah. I mean,
corn dog. And so I will say this. I will kindly disagree with you on the Joe T's that atmosphere-wise, Joe T. Garcia's is one of my favorite places in the world. And you mentioned earlier, the margaritas are excellent. It is excellent. I am a Ted's convert. My wife and I, that it holds special place to us because one of our first dates was at a Ted's, and we now have one in Lawton, which big ups to Lawton for having a Ted's. If we had more money, we'd eat there more often. But it is a special treat, and it is fun to compare and contrast places that you've been, and it's definitely one of those things where you can love where you've been and love where you're at too. And I think Oklahoma, I know Texas, Texans kind of bag on Oklahoma. It's kind of unfair because Texas is basically 4 states piled up into one because you've got so many freaking areas. But between Tulsa, OKC, and all the really neat kind of small and medium-sized towns in between Oklahoma, you'll find some darn good places to eat and visit too. And hopefully that is my goal, is cover as many football games and eat at as many
good restaurants as possible.
Many good restaurants as possible. Collin, thank you so much. This has been a crazy, awesome episode. Probably going to have to edit a bunch of this because we get on.
We just got off of tangents the whole time, and
we might need to get to Ulrich Stadium at like 3:30 just so we can get all of our small talk out of the way before kickoff on Friday night. Fingers crossed that it does get played on Friday. I don't think there are any
I'm hoping
issues yet, but it should be a heck of a game. And Collin, for those who want to follow you, where can they find you and how can they get a hold of the Clinton Daily News?
So if you said follow first, I'll go with that one. Twitter is if you want to follow it on Twitter, Clinton DN Sports it's all one word. Follow us on Twitter if you want to follow the game for Friday. Facebook, Clinton Daily News Sports. If you want to subscribe, obviously contact the paper and we'll get you through or whatever. But it's following the game through there is always a big help, and we always appreciate everyone that follows along. And Clinton's got a very rich tradition, so I always love covering them, and it's a fantastic place to be. So looking forward to Friday and what I expect to be a very good matchup between 2 physical programs that like to compete. So
absolutely, yes. Here's to a Smash Mouth football game, and everybody follow Collin, follow the Clinton Daily News, support local journalism, and tip your bartenders.
Absolutely.
And
we're giving life advice over here now. Tip your bartenders.
Pet your dogs. It's I'm excited, man. High school football is alive and well, and despite all the craziness, it truly does feel like it never left, and it feels great. And So here's some more great high school football. And Collin Wieder, thank you so much for being my guest this week. For SpOKen Philly, I'm Glenn Brockenbush signing off.